Well, so this was a fun one. This was a little bit outside the box for Good Energy, but we brought our own Seth Miller into the studio to talk a little bit about the crazy evolving world of digital storytelling, and give some pointers to those out there who are trying to get more of their content out there, and some of the best ways to do that.
Right. We've received a lot of compliments on our fresh approach to digital content development, and we figured it would be great to bring the source of that fresh content development right here into the studio. Seth is a terrific advisor, personality, internal influencer here at SIA to make it real for our membership. And I'll do my best to not be nonchalant, to be confident, to be authentic. So folks should listen in and hear how they too can represent their companies in a truly authentic way. Yeah.
There's some good pointers that Seth has that are kind of some of those common sense things that a lot of us forget when we're in those situations of, talking on camera or telling our story, even if it's just to somebody in person. And I think, we often, at least in my mind, sort of separate like the professional content or the professional story from the personal and the ways that we interact on social media, and sort of divide them into two buckets. And I think part of what I think has made your team's social content so successful is that it's trying to merge those two. Like let's treat these stories and these platforms with the same intensity and the same excitement and the same enthusiasm, because it doesn't have to be all stilted and professional on one side and then silly and funny on the other. I think we can do all of it at the same time.
Right. The whole goal of a digital content strategy is to build your audience and promote engagement. And unless it's relatable, unless it's authentic, you're not going to do either of those things. So we're hoping that this episode will be helpful to folks as they're thinking about how to do this on their end. We've received a lot of feedback at SIA about how our digital communication strategy is fresh, very sort of with it, very on top of the times. And we thought it would be a good opportunity to bring you in and as the head of digital communications at SIA, talk a little bit about what you're doing, so that perhaps as we give the industry some more opportunity to uplift each other and their individual businesses, that we could hear from the source on how to do that well.
Yeah, if you don't know who Seth is, I think you're living under a rock. Or at least if you're in our industry and have not seen his face, maybe you don't have a phone.
I'm flattered. Thank you so much. And I got to say, though, it does take a village. I am truly just the pretty face at the end of the product. And, Todd and Emily and Morgan and the entire team at SIA does a really, really good job putting together good digital content. So I get to reap the rewards of that. And so thank you for letting me be a part of it at all.
Yeah, you bet. So the first, I think the fundamental place to start is what's the number one piece of advice you'd give to any company or individual out there who's looking to build a digital profile on behalf of themselves or their company?
That's a great question. I think my general take on basically all social media is you've got to be authentic. There is I think a real lack of authenticity across platforms. And I think particularly with businesses have a hard time showing off or describing their story in a way that feels real, because oftentimes they're taught to follow really strict talking points or give their boilerplate explanation of who they are. Their elevator pitch is really polished. And I think especially in an era of social media where we get to see everything from everyone all the time, people are really, really eager for that level of authenticity in the content that they're consuming. So whether that comes out in the form of, humor, or whether it comes out in showing your employees in a specific way, or just sort of showing what you do, explaining the small minutia of your day-to-day lives. One of the most popular formats of TikToks these days is come a day in my life, walk through what my day looks like. And that's not because everyone is interested in every element of a day, but because they're interested in the sort of platform, the identity that a person has built online. And if you're a business, if you're a solar company that wants to tell that story, I think explaining what your business does, explaining why you have a bunch of people that all choose to work there and come into work every day and care deeply about solar energy or energy storage is that's your best bet at creating compelling digital content.
I feel like I like that you said explain, like you use the word explain a few different times. That I feel like when as social media has grown and in the last 5 years, there's a lot of times a narrative around people's attention spans, right? Like that we have to get the information out as quickly and as succinctly as possible. But I think that one of the things that you talk about is we shouldn't shy away from like getting into the nerdy details of stuff. And when you talk about a company being authentic and showing off what they do, that sometimes that comes with getting kind of nerdy about it. So talk a little bit about like the balance between, attention spans and trying to be, efficient in our delivery while also getting into like some actual weedy details.
Yeah. One conversation that I feel like I've had a couple of times now with other folks at SIA is if you try and build content for everyone, you're also kind of building content for no one. So if you are in the process of creating a video or trying to explain something, you kind of need to believe in your audience a little bit. And particularly in the solar industry or just in the energy industry writ large, like there's a lot of people that have good and important questions that want to consume content related to the work that they do. So, when we're at like RE+, for example, we're at a big event and we can kind of walk through and show off all of the cool things that are happening there. We're oftentimes talking to an audience that might also be at RE+, or might also be in the energy industry in a different space. And I think that explaining that content to them and kind of like letting them be a part of the larger industry, recognizing that like we're a big industry, there's a lot of people in here, and you're kind of creating an in-group almost, that people want to be a part of that. People want to be a part of this really exciting, quickly transforming industry and, showing them like, hey, you're a part of this and we're showing some parts of what you do and some parts of what the rest of the industry does. I think it's fun. People really want to consume that content. So, not shying away from the complexity there, I think, gives it an edge of like it creates an industry. It creates a sort of personality that the entire industry has. The other thing I would say about not shying away from complexity is that you need to move the conversation forward. You kind of need to define where people are starting at. So a lot of people have the idea that solar panels are often like just on roofs. And if you are only going to talk to the people that have like literally zero knowledge of solar panels, then you can only go so far in your content, right? So if you sort of accept that your audience is going to have a certain level of knowledge and then feed content to sort of like not just the lowest common denominator, but people who are already in the industry, people who already, have some interest in the content already, then it allows you to go so much further with the content. It allows you to start at a middle point and then explain much more in depth and actually sort of move the conversation forward in a way that you can't often do when you need to be explaining something to someone who has literally never heard or understood what solar panels are before. So I do really like that level of content. So especially when we were just recently at Sierra Week in Houston, the content that was being created there was very weedsy and very sort of like high level, but they're having really, really important conversations that I think the average person can relate to and can understand if they just get a little bit of the backstory there. So providing a little bit of that backstory and then being able to build more complex content to sort of paint the larger narrative that exists, it brings them in.
Right. So I think to sort of sum it up a little bit, right? Rule number 1, be authentic, humanize the work that your company is doing or humanize the work that you're doing. And that requires being vulnerable first, right? Showing some true humanity as part of the content that you're pulling together, and then double clicking into it from there to tell a more detailed story. It's interesting. All the folks that we interview here on the podcast are subject matter experts for their companies, obviously, and they know all the weedy details. If you ask somebody what a gigawatt actually is, blank space and time, right? But if you say, how many households are we talking about powering, that makes it real, right? So to the extent that we can give our listeners the tools to try to make their content more relatable, we would encourage them to do so. So we had originally framed this discussion as a sort of what's in and what's out in terms of content creation. So maybe we could go through a few of those, authenticity being sort of rule number one, and we identified a few others as part of our conversation. So what would you say would be maybe number 2 or number 3?
Well, I think authenticity is a great one. And I would also say like excitement for the content. Like if you're watching anyone online, if they are describing it in a very low monotone voice and sort of like don't believe what they're saying or are reading off of a script that they don't believe or didn't write, like you've lost people already, right? And I think there's also nothing more fun than watching somebody, an expert in their field, get really excited and into a concept that they are also discovering and learning and trying to explain. So, I mean, I think authenticity is one element of that, but also just like excitement for the content itself. And that's one thing that a lot of my friends make fun of my videos for is that I'm like very clearly very excited about the content and talking really fast or in a really high voice register just because like, but that's entirely purposeful and entirely authentic. Like I'm really trying to do that because I do care and am excited a lot about this content. So, that exists in all of the companies. As you said, like a lot of the folks that we interview and talk to throughout the industry are industry experts. And when they're having a conversation at a cocktail party, I'm sure they are much more animated. And if you can capture that version of them, that's going to be much more successful than the version of them that is reading off a script that they didn't write.
Have you had any experiences when you're off doing some of these shoots that like, the plan that you had going into it just is coming across too planned and too stilted, and so you pivot to like something that comes up in the moment, just to like, because like you said, if it comes across like it was like pre-designed to get a message across, it's gonna come across that way. So just like any examples of like what that looks like?
No, I have a couple of pretty good ones actually. So this happens all the time. You're interviewing somebody and they have a hard time not thinking about the fact that they will be on camera and the fact that they are thinking about the way that they will look on camera. And one of the questions I love to ask is, what does your family think you do? Because it immediately harkens back to this like, right, I'm a real person. I'm not just a talking head right now.
Like everyone else.
Yeah. And I have had to explain my job to my kids before, and that oftentimes immediately loosens them up, and it also makes them smile. I mean, everybody loves their family, and
none of our parents know what we do. None of our cousins, our sisters or brothers. I've been trying to explain to my parents what I do for 25 years, and they still don't get it.
Well, this is apparently a very popular thing amongst like the millennial set, is doing like PowerPoint parties of like present what someone else in your friend group's job is. I think maybe we should explore that within this industry.
I would love to know maybe what your job is.
Offsite activity. Writing that down.
So that's a good one. And I think, again, the goal there is to loosen them up. The other thing that I do every single time that I'm ever interviewing people is I never have anybody look into the camera, because like, boy, is it hard to talk to a lens as opposed to a face. So before every single interview that I do, I'm like, you're looking at me, you're having a conversation with me, you are not looking at the camera, you're not having a conversation with the camera. Like, it's just you and me going back and forth, and, talk to me like you would talk to anyone. The other statement I often make is, we've got 11 memory cards. If you want to mess up 1,000 times, like, go right ahead. Like, this is not, we don't need you to get the perfect soundbite every single time, because the perfect soundbite is going to be one that comes off naturally and not one that you scripted every word of. So.
Right. Yeah. That's good.
Maybe that's a good pivot point to what not to do. Right?
This sort of maybe goes along with the excitement element, but I don't think being nonchalant is out. I mean, I don't want to get too into pop culture generally, but like, people like people who care about the thing that they do, and
indifference is horrible.
Indifference is horrible. Yeah, and nobody wants to listen to somebody who's indifferent about the thing they're talking about, right?
Yeah. Like, show that you care a little bit.
Right. And especially in an industry like ours, where I think a lot of people are just like, they are in it for a really good reason. They tell themselves a story about why they're doing what they're doing that they find really powerful and motivating. And if you can tap into that element, then you've got a great video on your hands. You've got a great story to tell, and authenticity that then clearly comes through.
What about confidence? Talk a little bit about how you think about like bringing confidence to a piece of content and how that translates to maybe other people who don't feel so comfortable on camera.
Yeah. And I think confidence can come through in a couple of different ways. Sometimes, like I said, it comes through in the like I'm an expert in this field, and that's where I'm generating that confidence. But yeah, sometimes it comes through like from the family perspective. It's like, oh yeah, I know how to talk to my son or my parent about this, and that's where it comes through. The other thing is, as a whole industry, I would love for us to just all be more confident. Like I'd love to see a little more swagger, a little more cockiness throughout the entirety of the industry. I mean, you see this oftentimes with other issues or even other technologies, like nuclear. Oftentimes is like throwing shade a lot of different other directions. And I'm sort of like, yeah, like solar and storage were 84% of new electricity generation added to the grid last year. Like let's be cocky about that. Like let's not pretend like we are, like an alternative fuel source. Like we are the main story right now, and we should be confident in that main story. And so, as we tell that across the board, like explaining that in a way that also, gives solar and storage and this industry the credit it deserves for having built all of that work. That's good. I think that's fun, and like especially over the next 10 to 20 years, everyone who's currently in this industry is probably still going to be around in some capacity, and they're going to think back to like, oh hey, remember 20 years ago when we were still like unsure about how to tell our story or unsure about exactly what role we played. I don't think we're going to have a lot of I think there's going to be a lot more confidence at that point, even then, and we'll think back to this moment of sort of any amounts of lack of confidence with like, what were we even doing? What were we even thinking? Like we were so sure and so confident at that moment.
Yeah,
so.
Maybe it's a little fake it till you make it, but yeah. More of the main character energy.
Character energy. Oh my gosh, yes.
Well, and I think when it comes to digital content production, it matters who you surround yourself with, right? I feel like, for example, Seth and I get in a room and we're just firing off ideas, right? Yeah. By the time it's 30 minutes have gone, it's 45 minutes into our 30-minute meeting, and we're still writing ideas down because we vibe in that way. And I think whenever you're creating something that you want to be fresh, you want to make sure that whoever's with you, you're drawing some positive, fresh, confident energy from, and that you're not stuck in a dry, corner trying to tell a story that's not going to resonate with anybody.
Yes.
So it's a tactical thing, but it matters who you're with. When you're trying to create something interesting.
Yeah. Knowing the spaces where you're going to be most creative and like finding the people to be creative with is so critical, because we get stuck in these sort of like, oh, I just got to churn through and like make all this, stuff happen and get this stuff out into the world. And if you don't give yourself the time to have a 45-minute meeting that was supposed to be a 5-minute meeting, then I think you're going to miss out on a lot of good ideas.
Yeah. So. Yeah. The one thing that I would also add there is like go through the iterations of it too, like that, who you surround yourself with is really important, and they will also do a really good job of editing whatever you put together, right? So a lot of times I will come in with a video or a pitch that I am bringing to Steph or bringing to anyone else on the team, and they'll go, yeah, this is really good, but like you need to do this one thing very, very differently. And then I'll see it and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I didn't think about it. It's like it wasn't working until you talked about it. So whether that's at the beginning or like the sort of scripting process of a video or a particular graphic, this happens with Emily, our brand and design director as well. Like she'll just change one thing on a graphic that I had put together, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you nailed it! Like it works so much better now. So that level of collaboration, I think, is an important one too, and then getting that from multiple perspectives, right? Like I feel like I can speak accurately about a lot of what's going to do well on social, but when it comes to some of the like visual graphic elements, like I'm as lost as anybody, and you have other people on the team who are specialized and who are good at that work too. So
I do have one more question that is kind of a pivot away from all of the positive tips and tricks we're giving folks when they're developing content, and that is how to address misinformation from a content development perspective, because it's tough. Yeah. We don't want to chase a shiny object. You don't want to repeat the thing you don't want people to hear. So I wondered if there's any advice you could give our listeners in that regard.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not easy. If anyone had the silver bullet, they'd have figured it out by now. We wouldn't have a misinformation problem, certainly.
Yeah, right.
So I do think that you can either go. I think generally you should be telling a positive story. You should be explaining, instead of trying to sort of acquiesce or cede ground in some ways to certain bad arguments. You should just make the good argument well and sort of trust your audience to believe in that
and tell the truth.
And tell the truth, right? Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
The truth
absolutely.
wins.
Yeah. No, 100%. The truth wins, and when the facts are on your side, be able to state the facts confidently, and then then just like trust your audience to believe those facts. I think that then there are other moments where that you can't do that, where the media or the sort of the tide of public opinion has shifted against you, or there's a bad article, or there's some sort of disaster that really does mean that you have to address something head on. And I think then again, facts are what win out. So address it head on. Recognize that there are this drawback, or there's this thing has happened, and we're working to fix it. Again, this sort of goes back almost to authenticity, which is like, if you're gonna kind of sort of pussyfoot around the issue, or you're gonna try and throw enough messaging at it that you never really take responsibility, that's going to be clear to whoever is consuming it also. If you're sort of shoveling bull, it's hard to not look like you're shoveling bull. So I think that at that point, it's just sort of like go straight at it. Don't pretend like it's doesn't exist, or that there's going to be a way to talk your way out of it. Just address the issue as it is, and again, then follow up with the facts of the case. And I think we've seen that in a couple of different places around the industry, right? As we go forward, I think there are fewer and fewer, or we've done a good job of addressing a lot of other misinformation. So there are fewer and fewer big stories or lines that have conventional wisdom pieces that have just sort of finally been debunked. But again, there are going to be occasionally bad things that happen, and addressing them very clearly and openly and honestly is, I think, always going to be your best bet.
Yeah, that absolutely is the case. It's the golden rule for crisis communications, PR. Whenever you find yourself in a situation like this, it's spot on to hit it right across the nose with the truth, and defend your industry with facts and move on with your day. Right. Trying to sugarcoat it isn't going to work.
Right. And that's the crisis communication scenario. And then at the same time, I think your original point was right, which is don't chase the shiny object. We could spend all of our time debunking every random fringe internet conspiracy theory that you read on Reddit, but that would suck all of our time, and we'd end up talking about things we just are not worth talking about. And most people don't believe instinctively, but we have a great story to tell. So it's fun to tell that story.
Well, and yet, you all did a great myth-busting series with Abby last year that I think focused on not chasing down every single rabbit hole of misinformation, but focusing on a few themes that are out there, and there's no doubt that those sort of bad faith arguments or pieces of misinformation are out there. But really what it did is give, like you said, an opportunity to tell the positive story and focus on, the facts, and being clear and confident about what it is that we have to add to that conversation. Yeah. And I think people do get a little bit afraid of the myth-busting approach because you don't want to give oxygen to bad faith arguments and all that. But I think if you don't, it's you gotta address it. You gotta be confident about I'm ready to tackle this bad faith argument because the facts are on my side. So,
right. Yeah. And also, I'd like not to be too much of an infomercial for SIA here, but that is why an industry association exists too, right? Yeah. Is our ability to provide good information to people and to line up the when it's clear misinformation that has been out there, to be able to line up the arguments on a video or on a blog somewhere, just so that everybody in the industry can say, yep, these are the real facts, and here's the way that we are combating this level of misinformation. And again, at that point, you're not giving a lot of oxygen, but you're helping the rest of the industry, tell the story in the right way and have the facts at their disposal when, of course, they are inevitably confronted with some amount of misinformation.
Well, this has been fun. I'm gonna ask you one more question, and if it's too tough, then we'll just cut it out. But social media is changing so fast.
Ooh, yeah.
What do you think like what's going to be the next thing to happen? Like a year from now, like how different is it going to be? Do you have any like?
Let me get my pen.
Yeah, right. Like any ideas for where we're heading? Like a year ago, I think I would have said something about TikTok, but I'm not sure what's going on with TikTok these days. So I'd love to hear your prognostications about the future of social media.
Yeah. So I sort of have two, and I sort of have two maybe that I would go into. The first is I do want to talk a little bit about influencers, because I feel like I'd be remiss to miss an opportunity to talk a little bit about that, where the people who carry messages, we want to trust our messengers, right? And I think in a lot of ways, trusting our messengers has become almost more important in a lot of ways than the message. So, people now really, really follow specific influencers. Like, they're oftentimes not just obsessed with scrolling their own friends' news feeds. They're scrolling the people's news feeds who have something interesting to say and who they trust to like deliver them good information. And I think there's going to be like an even greater evolution of the way that the role that influencers have in people's lives. But I also don't want to say like this isn't just influencers who are doing like random get readies with me. Like, I follow an influencer who's really good, talks about hydrology. She does like a spooky lake month thing and gets really into the hydrology, and she's just a great science communicator. And I'm excited about her because she's just really good at explaining things. Another guy who does linguistics TikToks, who will just throw around little things, little like tidbits and fun facts that I'm like, it's a really fun thing to have learned about. And I think that the fact that exists kind of across the board, you're not just obsessed with like one person's style or one person's whatever. That those are things that are going to continue to grow, and we're going to continue to form sort of unique communities on the internet that are maybe obsessed with hydrology, or maybe obsessed with linguistics, or maybe obsessed with solar or energy systems or things like that. So that level of like sort of community building, and specifically community building off of the backs of individual influencers and trusted voices, is something that is going to continue to evolve, and something that anyone who wants to be good at social media should identify those communities, identify those spheres, and work to be involved in the conversation in some way and push the conversation forward with those folks. It feels like we are continually losing the interaction with our close-knit circles. So I think that there are, like, I don't even really post that much to Instagram anymore, but like it is where all my friends are. So if I wanted to know what my friends are doing, I can go to their Instagram pages, but like there's not content creation is not happening in the sort of interpersonal level with your close-knit friend groups quite as much. And
that's so interesting. And that's along the lines of what I was going to comment on or ask you. I'm not even sure if it was a question or not, but given everything that's going on with the attack on traditional journalism and the fact that the majority of American people are getting their news from Facebook and other social media channels, it's a really interesting point that people are losing touch with their tight-knit circles because the algorithms are changing on Instagram and Facebook, so that they're more inclined to get you to buy something. So that's why that's happening. But then what's happening to the news consumption element of what people are absorbing? Because for me, it's a lot of capitalism, and I'm not sure what effect this is having on other people.
That's an interesting one, because I think the rise of AI has also created tons and tons of sort of like content farms that are putting out really, really basic content, or like it's like clips from a TV show and a video game being played on the other side. And it's often referred to as like slop on the internet. It's literally just sort of like being shoveled out there, typically by automated processes. And, if that's what you're getting, especially if they can make money off of that, especially if they can sell you something, to your point, that is going to dominate more and more parts of the internet. Now, I think the losing touch with some of your interpersonal relationships, that combined with some of the losing touch with your interpersonal relationships, if there's a lot of slop and there's not a lot of friends out there, people are then very desperate for authentic, trusted voices. For connection.
Drink the sand.
And so it's like, how do you create an authentic voice and a relatable voice that then the people in your sphere, the people in your circles, the people who care about the same things that you do can find you and can engage with you and can further the conversation in those ways too. So I think that there's the second, sort of larger point is maybe like there's going to be an eagerness for building larger connections, and I think that is going to happen in some of those more tight spheres that are built around specific topics or whatever. And I think that if the energy industry or the solar industry can do that pretty well, if it can find a couple of trusted voices that can speak authentically and speak openly about their role and the changes in the industry and the future of the industry. Then that's where you will see a lot of people kind of congregating online, because that's what people are desperate for, is that authenticity and that connection.
Well, we're so glad to have one of those authentic voices here with us today. Thank you, Seth. All of this is just gold. Yeah. I think it's really insightful advice for all of our listeners and our membership and anybody else who's listening in, and me personally. So thank you so much for all you have to offer.
Thank you for having me.
Keep it going.
I will. You'll see my face at least a few more times, unfortunately.